Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Good evening, everybody. I have new observations on the network to share with you. Some new So yeah, I've been doing a little bit of analytics stuff, and I've put some chart form to kind of map stuff in the past. Some things. So what I've been doing is the same data that I use make all those maps. Just kind of present it in a different way that might be easier to take some general observations away from. So this first plot that I've done, this is on the horizontal axis sideways. We have epoch, so we have epoch 240 through 246, right? 241, 242, 43, 44, 45, 46. And on y-axis or the vertical axis, we have the number of relays, right? And the different lines represent different infrastructure providers that people use to host their relays, right? And this is the most simplistic way we can think about things. It's just a number of relays. The one thing here is that I've grouped together infrastructure providers because there's actually like I think thousands of them, so that if there were in each epoch, if there were only 1 to 9 of those providers, or 1 to 9 of those relays on that provider, they all get grouped together into this dotted green line, which represents, most likely like people running a pool from their house or from their like local ISP that no one else is really using that relay for. Then I have these kind of maybe regional players, which are people pool relays or infrastructure that has between 10 and 99 relays on the network. Those are represented by this dotted orange line. And the reason I chose to call those out as dotted is because this is not really an individual provider. Neither is this one. It's an aggregation of a bunch of very small providers and a bunch of medium-sized providers. And then, interestingly, if you look at the providers who have over 100 relays on their network, you're only left with these guys left. I didn't have to clean up the list. Before, this list had like 1,000 or 2,000 different infrastructure providers, but now we're left with AS Chupa. I don't know who that is. AWS, right? We all recognize this bright teal line. Contabo. DigitalOcean is another big one, this orange line. Who else? Google Cloud Platform, GCP, Hetzner, and OVH are the two. That's kind of interesting, just a raw count of relays on the different infrastructures. And then we'll go to this one first. This one is kind of more interesting. This is what we do, right, where we take for every pool on the network. If we were to divide the number of its total stake by the number of relays it has, and then look, kind of assign that to each relay. That way we don't double count the ADA. That tells us that most of the ADA on the network is staked on AWS. And more interestingly maybe, is that there's not much change over time if you look at things this way, right? We can see it looks like an epoch 244 to 245. I'm guessing some big pools or somebody big switched over from DigitalOcean to AWS, because you can see the amount of ADA staked on the DigitalOcean network has dropped. The amount of ADA staked on the AWS network has really peaked. But maybe more interesting, and it kind of makes sense, is that these numbers don't really change that much from epoch to epoch. Another way of looking at it, and I think this might actually be more relevant from a decentralization perspective, is just to think about, rather than dividing the total stake of each pool by the number of relays it has, every relay gets the full representation of the pool it belongs to. So over here, if you were to add up all these numbers, they would, in each epoch, they should equal the amount of ADA staked that epoch. Over here, we don't have that problem. We can, if I have 1 million ADA in my pool that's staked, and I have 10 relays, there will be 10 million ADA counted here. So this number should always be larger than the other one. And maybe one good positive takeaway here is that if you think about things this way, actually AWS is no longer in the lead. It's the pools or the ISPs that are hosting between 10 and 99 relays on the network, which is kind of cool, right? It means that these intermediate level players which are not really one ISP, right? This represents thousands of ISPs, are actually holding the largest amount of ADA distributed all around the world. So that made me quite happy. And even the ISPs that are holding between 1 and 9 relays on their network, they're still competitive with some of let's see, the first, second, third, the fourth largest ISP dominant thing, right? So there's AWS, which is here. This is Hetzner is the dark one. DigitalOcean is the orange. And then this OVH guy. OVH and even single pool ISP are in aggregate, all of them put together are kind of comparable. So news. And this is just a check on my data. If you were to count the number of relays that were active in Epoch 240 to Epoch 246, I believe this tracks roughly with what I've observed over on Pool.io, that right now we have around 3,114 relays that are registered on chain. This might be plus or minus a few because of differences in the queries that I use to generate it versus what they use. And here I think my stake per relay, if we add up all that together, right, I'm seeing 19.9 billion ADA staked on the network. I think there's something like 20 or 21 billion ADA staked on the network right now. So I am missing a little bit because of the way that the data that I gather tries to locate it to latitude and longitude, right? So that could be accounting for that. And on the other side of this, you have, rather than dividing it, right, this is the total stake. This is where we say, if we double count ADA every relay that a pool has, we end up with, there's actually like around 43 billion ADA represented in the pools, because, right, I think this actually does make sense to think about this way, because as long as one of their relays is alive, all of their ADA is represented. So this line of thinking, it does make sense. But I thought this was kind of interesting about, and maybe if we were to have a conversation about what people can do to help with these numbers, is, right, if you are a large pool or a multi-pool operator, at least if you are spreading your infrastructure out away from these guys, that would be one way that you could kind of still argue that you're increasing or helping decentralization a bit, right? And if you're a delegator, actually, and you want to increase the decentralization, using a tool that I've developed, but basically this is this is where I get a bit conflicted. These guys tend to be like the most professional, highest uptime providers out there. So I'm not saying that the network shouldn't have AWS and whatnot, but we look over here, right, we pop open the window, go look at relays again. This relay view on it over by the left hand side, this is the one you want to use actually to find a pool near you or something like that, right? So what we can do is we can go over and we can add a filter, or even before we add filters, if we just say that like I live near the Great Lakes and I want to find a pool near me in the, you know, I live in Canada, I think this is what, Toronto area. You can just zoom in and you can just mouse over and see who are the providers, right? So this little dot with dual, ticker dual, he's running on DigitalOcean. You can see that right here, right? His infrastructure provider is DigitalOcean. If we were to go over to here, they're using OVH. At some level, it's resolving to OVH. Here's an interesting one. Have their ticker listed. In the metadata, it could be missing, but thing is using TechSavvy. Beetle is on Rogers Communications. See, this Rogers is a kind of ISP. Canada and some parts of the northern US. I've heard that name before. Execulink on this one. Oh, Onan. And yeah, just so I actually use a different provider called RackNerd, but they're very small. So I guess at some level they're resolving or co-located, you know, system. So that's how that's being captured. So this is not totally accurate, but it does kind of give you an idea of what kind of infrastructure. I see there. But if you wanted to look at it more from a global level, right, you could come back out here. More from a global level, right? You could come back out here. Would add a filter. So we're over here on this little funnel tube. Say filter for. Let's say I had the opposite take. You know, I only wanted people who were using AWS because maybe, you know, my opinion is that if you're on AWS, you're probably some kind of IT professional who knows what they're doing because it's not the most intuitive thing to set up, right? So right now, if you look over here, I've filtered and we're only looking at pools that are on AWS. The difficult thing here is because AWS is so popular, we can kind of see another tab. AWS. You can actually kind of see how these map pretty closely, right? I'm going to put the Cardano one on the left. You can see, let's see if we can find some of these, right? In here, we have the pool Texan, which is located up in Seattle. You can see all of Dan, iOS 1, BVI, C, Lyft, all these guys. They're resolving to the same location, and most likely they're also on AWS. Because if the API is telling us that they're in this latitude, longitude, they probably have an IP that is kind of run out of this data center, right? So this is probably, I'm going to guess, the US West Oregon region, right? Up in there. And then this one, is this San Francisco or, yeah, that's San Francisco. So this is probably US West, right? With HODL and all these pools down here. We also have probably US East Ohio, right? Oh, tons of pools in Ohio region. And what is this one? Canada Central. That or more AWS Canada. This is probably the New York one, right? Or US East. That's GovCloud, so so that's that. I wonder South America, like, right? That's kind of mapping right there to the Sao Paulo region. Head over to Africa, right? This little purple dot right here with Abbey, like it's in the Johannesburg. This is or Cape Town. I initially was going to open my pool in this Cape Town region because I thought that would be cool, but in AWS, at least when I was doing it, you have to request them to turn on that region for you. Interestingly, there are some pools in the Middle East, but no one is using the AWS Middle Eastern regions, right? And then over here you have the Mac Daddy of all IOG. Noticed everyone else, but I hope they're also running in other places. Right. Right, but okay, there's that. And then I know the Mumbai region is another popular one for AWS, right? So we have this Elon pool and 5 other pools running in Mumbai. Singapore's probably got another bunch. Yeah, Singapore's got a ton because Southeast Asia, that's a major data center. And then probably the Tokyo one. Tokyo's got a decent amount. What's South Korea doing? South Korea got a few in AWS 4 or 5. And lastly, Sydney. Got a decent. That's how you can kind of use this to find different pools, different places. And yeah, I think what I'm gonna make is like a staking 102 video next. Which will probably hopefully talk about like how to go if we were to go back. How to if this is something that's interesting to you and you want to help with the decentralization of the network, and probably that video will also talk about why that's important. Just briefly, if we were if you're wondering why people are always talking about decentralization, a blockchain is basically a distributed database, and if you want to have a globally available database solution, there are a lot faster ways of doing that than through a blockchain, right? AWS has, look at all these on the left. Aurora, RDS, Redshift. I use a lot of RDS and Redshift at work. So more recently, Athena is a different thing, but these are super performant, really, what do you call it? Scalable solutions for keeping track of any kind of database data you want to. But, of course, the downside is that they are available or provided at the will of Amazon, as was seen recently. Parler deplatforming. So, if you want to go through the trouble of having a distributed, decentralized ledger network, you probably want to make sure that it's actually a distributed and decentralized ledger. If it's not, you are just going through a bunch of hassle and pain, and you're not really getting any of the thing. And like I said, there are some pretty interesting things here in that the 10 to 99 relay providers are not as small as I thought they would have been, and they are actually pretty significant in terms of how much ADA they're holding on. So I don't have to be my usually grumpy self. There's some optimism here. Oh, that's neat. That's neat. And I think that's about it for what I wanted to cover in terms of this. It's going to be interesting to me in the future. You know, how does this grow? You can already kind of see. Too bad I didn't start measuring this stuff earlier on, but you can start to see the growth in the network over time. I think this should be pretty interesting to see. I wonder where we're headed now that ADA is at 50 cents. Kind of amazing to me. I didn't imagine things would get here this quickly when I started buying in around 12 cents or so. 12 to 9 cents, I think. I was hoping to have a bit more time to build up my bags, but hope we're all enjoying price appreciation. James is asking in chat, how big does a pool have to be to guarantee rewards every epoch? I believe that number is something like 1.32 million ADA right now. Viper, he does it. The way that's calculated is you have to calculate or figure how much ADA is staked on the entire network, I think, like, and the D parameter. So I'm gonna search for a Viper because he always cool. But it's somewhere around 1.32, and as D goes up, that number will go down. K parameter won't change that. K parameter is supposed to make it so that people spread their ADA out more, right? So K helps small pools because it lowers the ceiling for how much ADA can be in any one pool, and the idea is that that should encourage people to spread their ADA out more, right? So I think right here, 1.29 million stake required to make one block, 1.29 million ADA. So, right, just as an example of that, I think this epoch, with all, we finally got most of the ADA that has been staked with us live. I'll just pull that up to kind of explain here. So if you look at here on the left, just using my pool as an example, we were at 200K-ish for a while, and then we did a big jump up to like 362, 373,000 now, and it's only in the past epoch or two that 100,000 extra ADA has been live, and I can tell you that we went from around a 20% chance of making a block every epoch to a 27% chance. So we're now a little bit better than 1 in 4. Right? And if you look at this purple line, this luck, we got really lucky early on, where we got a block. This block, I'd say, it was about normal. I think I had a 10% chance of getting a block around in this left-hand region, but we got it in like 9th or maybe 7th epoch, it looks like. So that was a little bit early, but not too crazy. And yeah, so our luck was 133% of what it should be, or what it could have been. But the crazy thing was that we won an epic without something, and then it should have come like another 10 epics later, but then we got another one. So we actually had a luck of 197%, which means like we had almost, double what we could expected. Yeah, so James is asking, now will the rewards average out over the course of the year, or does a person have a better chance of getting higher rewards with a small stake pool? All stake pools should have, for the same amount of pledge, should have the same amount of rewards, even if they're small or large. But in a small pool, you have a greater chance of being above average than you do with a large pool, but you also have a greater chance of being below average than you do with a large pool. If you're in a large pool, you have It's just like it's like you're playing a dice game and you're rolling. You're rolling so many times. Your average roll will be closer to 3, right? Because if you roll the dice 1,000 times and you add up and average all those numbers that you rolled, they're going to be much closer to 3 than if you roll the dice 10 times, right? If you roll the dice 10 times, you could, have hot hands and get a bunch of sixes and a bunch of, 4 and 5s maybe. So you could end up like, I would say Monad is a pretty good example of a pool that was, well, let's say, got very lucky, right? And now we've gone, I'd say, about a normal amount of time, 1, 2, 3, 4 epochs now without hitting a block. But also during these 4 epochs, we did not have a 25 or 27% chance of minting a block, right? And you can see, according to ADA pools, even given the fact that we didn't have a block over here and we didn't have a block over here, for our stakers, if you had been with us from the beginning, you would still have almost a 9% return over the lifetime of the pool. So if you were here from the beginning till now, we've been very lucky, and our lifetime luck now is at 168%. I'm thinking right now that probably gonna get another block, in the next epoch or two. I'm hoping. So that's that. In the meantime, I've had a lot of time because I've known that the pool wasn't going to get a block in the next epoch from looking at the leader logs. So I had a lot of time to kind of better set up our pool so that it's running more efficiently and taking care of itself, and not having to worry that the maintenance that I was doing was going to interfere with getting a block. So I think that's about it. Pretty cool what's going on. And do you have any thoughts or concerns or questions about some of this data? Be interested to hear what you think if you're watching this after it was live. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe, and I'll give you more sleepy Eeyore videos late at night for you or early in the morning. Okay? Cheerio.